Warning: the following video contains subjects involving abuse, manipulation, grooming, and pedophilia. Please do not go after or harass anyone mentioned here, even Zach. I do not wish to cause any further trouble, as I am only making this video to spread awareness. Also, I apologize in advance if the way I speak is hard to understand sometimes. I'm new to doing longer form videos like this, and as someone with autism, I tend to struggle when it comes to talking sometimes. Please bear with me, and ask in the comments if you have any questions or trouble understanding anything. Thank you. Hey everybody, I'm the Smash Waffle. Chances are you probably already know me from my other content here. But today, I want to focus on a much more serious subject. I want to talk about how I was from the Zach K is, or is once known as ToonKriticY2K. I've learned that's a name that many people know and loathe, and not without good reason at all. For the year and 8 months that I knew Zach, I was completely unaware of the atrocities he committed, and you wouldn't believe my shock when I found that he groomed a 14-year-old girl. That wasn't the only horrible thing he'd done either, because I learned and realized later how much he'd done to hurt both me, nearly everyone else I met through him, and so many more people. I first met Zach through an online role-playing community over on Twitter, back when it was officially called that, in December of 2022. I was still fresh into writing as Arvin from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and Zach wrote a character who I loved to ship him with, Nimona. After writing together for a while, and getting together with some other people who wrote with him in a Discord server, I got to know Zach better as a person. Zach came off as a rather friendly and inviting person. He didn't show any judgment towards anything that I told him about, and was even into a lot of the same things that I was. I'd show a lot of my art in the server that I made, and he really took a liking to it. He especially appeared to enjoy anything I do with Arvin and Nimona together. To boot, things looked pretty bright for us as friends, and it wouldn't take too long for him to invite me to his personal server, Zone 0. I'll call it Zone for shortening. My first year in knowing Zach was sort of a blur, since I had a lot going on around that time. College, pet sitting, internships, family drama, internet drama. It was so much at once. What I do remember in the background is that he commissioned me a lot for various fanfiction and D&D campaigns he'd run. I didn't mind this starting off, since it usually wasn't much more than a character or two. Although he'd beg me for lower prices for one reason or another sometimes, I usually let it happen since I wanted to stay on his good side, and admittedly I'm a bit of a doormat. Things started to get overwhelming when he started to commission me big projects with a multitude of characters and details, which took a lot of energy not only because pieces of this scale would be on my usual scope, but because I was hardly familiar with any of the characters featured. Of course, being the doormat that I am, I obliged. I saw a benefit because I was getting paid, even if it was well under what it should have been worth. It was broadening my horizons, and I won't lie, it was actually kind of fun to try and tackle something like it. I just wish it wasn't under the conditions that they were under. Besides that, I'd also partake inside the voice chats in Zone, where I get to know some of his closer friends like Space, Danny, and who I'll call Mush for privacy reasons. They'll all be important later. We'd play games together, usually Smash or Mario Kart, and I get to know things about them as I spent more time around. Zach had a bit of a tendency to be competitive at times, and he'd often blame it on his streamer mindset since he used to be a streamer who played video games. Space had known Zach for a long time and even knew him in real life. They used to date, but things apparently didn't work out. Danny didn't spend a whole lot of time around the group due to his own hobbies, and Zach would oftentimes envy the facts. But he did host a couple of D&D campaigns that I partook in. Mush also used to date Zach, but things didn't work out between them either. Sort of a similar case to Space's, but different in a few ways. I'll elaborate later. As I spent more time in Zone, people would come and go every now and then. Some faces you got to know through various voice calls early on, and others you got to know better later through some of Zach's fanfiction projects that he gathered people for. I'd personally say things went pretty swimmingly overall with Zach and his little community up until around early 2024. Maybe March at earliest. Things started to shake a little for the group, and Zach apparently told one of his pals, Vinny, that some others in the group were allegedly shit-talking about them in another server. This led to him being shunned by those people, caused Vinny to lose trust in them. Zach eventually convinced him to cut ties with them, but despite how they intended to reconcile with him. I wasn't astute when it came to the situation, so I wasn't familiar with everyone involved, but looking back, I can see how Zach's influence turned things for the worst. Meanwhile, I'd be hearing a lot about this from him while playing Fortnite with a couple of his other friends, Jude and Rocker. Like me, they oftentimes just went along with whatever he said or dumped about during those gaming sessions. Zach often rambled about things going on in his own life or with other online friends in circles like that situation. There's one time, however, that I think about a lot. Looking back, I'm ashamed I didn't cut him off after this, after how utterly disrespectful and blatantly aggressive it was of him to do this. So, I posted a sketch of Nimona and Arvin together in my art channel, like always, and later on when we were playing Fortnite with Jude and Rocker, Zach decides to bring it up. He first mentions how I said I was sort of branching away from drawing the ship, since I've been drawing it significantly less than before. I used to draw it a lot like a year ago. And then he says something along the lines of, "And what do I find? A drawing of them in your channel." After that, he starts rambling on about how I need to branch out, like I said I would, along with other comments like, "Ooh, the game is bad." And while I'm sure they just figured it was just a joke, I recall the other two chimed in and snarky comments like, "This is an intervention." Of course, he played this off and treated it as a joke, both then and when I brought it up much later. But it personally hurt me to where I'm 97% sure it triggered something in me. I've dealt with a lot of bullying growing up, and it's hurt me in many ways. But never did it hurt more coming from someone I once considered one of my closest online friends over the very thing that brought us together in the first place. I was in ruins the next day thinking about it, but I kept it all to myself because I didn't want people to think I was sensitive for being that upset over what was supposedly just a joke. It was the same song and dance that I went through with similar friends who turned out to be assholes. You know who you are. Besides the obvious, another part of why I should have cut him off there is because things only started to derail further. He started moving deadlines for his commissions to earlier dates than I initially asked for. He began getting more irritable during voice chats and gaming sessions, and on a new RP account he made on Twitter, he started blatantly begging me for free art thinking I wouldn't know it was him, and basically admitted it straight up. He also showed further passive aggression about my comfort ship through in-character interactions on that account. Things reached the tipping point for Vinny, Jude, Rocker, and everyone else later on, when Zach made a very inappropriate joke directed towards one of their mutual friends he crushed on. After they pieced things together about how toxic he was, and how Jude and Rocker came forth about how Zach used to unwontedly flirt with and ask them out, they and their friend group left Zach behind. I still feel like a fucking idiot for what I did next. So Zach pulls me into a voice chat to explain all this, but does so in the most blatantly one-sided and biased way ever, looking back. He made Vinny and the others look as if they were being unreasonable, and left out some pretty crucial details about the situation. You see, a reasonable adult would have gone to the other side to ask for questions, but because I personally felt a bit alienated from their group at the time, I just believed what Zach had to say and distanced myself from those people. Even now, I am still kicking myself hard for it. Another month had passed, and I grew a little closer to Zach in that time. I invited him to space my personal server, where they made pretty good friends with my buddy Talon, and we all just kind of chilled for a while. Zach would often talk about how guilty he felt about what happened, and how he was going to better himself and see a therapist, but that never weighed the mood down too much. At one point though, he did link me to an initial call-out post directed at him on Twitter, which was from one of the people that Vinny previously had trouble with. What especially struck me as odd was that he told me not to tell Space about it, but I didn't look into it. Things had sort of returned to normal without his old friends, up until August 8th, 2024. That's a day I will never forget, because it's the day that I learned the ugly truth about Zach Kayas. It was just a bright and sunny day. Everything was going fine. I had just finished up another character commission for Zach. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Zach brings up that Vinny made a call-out thread about him on Twitter, taking up his past. Previously, Zach had dropped hints about his past online being something he wasn't exactly proud of, especially one time when he brought up an interview he did with Cat Icarus. I never thought much of it until now, so I was itching with curiosity to know what could have been that. Oh. I'd gotten several DMs from Zach telling me not to bother at the time since I took a look at the thread. But it was already too late. My head was spinning. My blood was boiling. My heart was pounding. Never in my life could I have guessed that Zach used to be a popular brony YouTuber who did such horrible things like he did. But at the same time, it explains so much. It explained why he never did anything publicly. It explained why he said everything that happened from 2018 to 2020 was a blur. It explained why he was so terrified of being put back in the spotlight. In any case, I spent hours away from my socials looking deeper and deeper into his past as ToonKriticY2K. There was too much he'd done that I couldn't forgive if I tried. I felt even worse knowing that I was on the wrong side of this feud the whole time. I eventually decided to block him, leave Zone, and ban him from my server. And I posted a brief document explaining my side to my situation to Twitter and my server. I reconciled with Vinny and his friends after the fact and apologized for how I wronged them. And I am happy they're as forgiving as they were about it. As much as I hope that Zach's pleased for me to talk to him before I cut him off to be the last I'd personally hear from him, I realized that Talon was still in his graces, and he wasn't updated on the situation at all. So I found out that Zach pulled him into a voice chat to whine about what happened when he came back from work, and he even tried to make him bring me into the call. What especially pissed me off was that after he essentially tried to use my own friend as a tool to get me back, he had the audacity to guilt me by saying I was one of the best friends he'd ever had. This was the only time I'd ever heard him tell me anything like that. And this was something that I learned was a very common manipulation tactic of his later. At the end of the day, I felt like I had a big weight taken off me after realizing how much Zach had been dragging me down. But at the same time, it still hurt me so much that someone I thought I could call a good friend turned out to be pure evil on the inside. And the time after I left him behind, I've learned a lot more about Zach, both looking back on my time with him and from others who used to know him. I realized that he had a tendency to wipe his tracks and delete entire servers and conversations, which stemmed from how he'd been doing the same thing for 6 years to run away from accountability. I found out that when he invited someone of his own who had a history of grooming, his only big takeaway from finding out was that he'd be losing out on roleplay with them. I learned that he'd been manipulating me in a lot of ways, and I probably would have hit on me too if I were into guys, since he made a couple comments suggesting such. Most importantly, Mush came forth to me about their own experience with Zach. Mush was an old victim of his. He verbally, psychologically, emotionally, and even physically abused him. And at one point, he even sold their nudes, along with many others, without anybody's consent. I was shocked that I never knew about this before, since Mush continued to talk to him up until earlier that year. But I understood why that was, since they were also thoroughly manipulated by him. I learned from them that Space and Danny knew about everything as well, and probably would have stayed in Zach's corner if he ever bounced back from this. Danny, I never learned anything more about, and the only other thing I know about him is that he went by Z-Trooper. He's gone AWOL by now. Space, on the other hand, is another story in of itself. He had known Zach since he was 15 years old, and was pretty much his biggest fan for years. Even after Zach had solicited nudes from a 16-year-old when he was 18 as means of forgiveness, Space is still stuck by his side. Hell, they were dating when the whole grooming thing was going on, and he still stuck to him after that. However, I learned later that Space finally came to his senses and pushed Zach away shortly after everything came crashing down. I'm not sure what the hell took him so long, but to say the least, it's better late than never that I freed himself of this shit. As for Mr. K's himself, he did make another attempt at coming back at one point. You see, back on Twitter RP, he was stupid enough to actually admit what he did to someone shortly after I called him out on my Arvin, and he was chased away when his past was further brought to light. Suspiciously, one of his OCs, Valerie, would resurface under quote-unquote new management by the name of Jinxie. However, it didn't take long at all to figure out it was another alias of Zach's, and thus he was chased away yet again. I don't doubt he either will or already has resurfaced yet again at least somewhere, as pedophiles are harder to squash than cockroaches. Through and through, Zach may actually be the worst person I've ever known, and that's saying a lot given the kind of assholes I've ever put up with. What makes him come out on top is that he pretends to be this friendly person to lure you in, and acts like any cruelty on his part is unintentional. He did nothing but make excuses for bullying, sexual harassment, and attempted trafficking of a 14-year-old girl from the Philippines. As if there is any reason to forgive him, hardly a single sorry ever escaped him for any of this. He manipulates people that he tricks into thinking he's friends with, and he uses them as tools for his own benefits, whether that be for his childish fantasies or vouching for his bullshit. He manipulated me, he manipulated Talon, he manipulated Vinny, and he manipulated Space, who was way more loyal to Zach's sorry ass than he ever fucking deserved. People are nothing more than tools to Zach, and he truly cares for nothing else but himself. There is no changing for people like Zach, and I should have never believed he had a shred of hope left in him. I shouldn't have fallen for his pampering about being his friend. I shouldn't have trusted his lies about how Vinny and his friends betrayed him. I shouldn't have believed that any amount of therapy could change him. This is all the same shit he says every time that he ends up in hot water like this, acting like a spoiled little kid so the worst he'll get is a slap on the wrist, when he's a grown-ass man in his mid-30s. There is no excuse for him. There never was. If you're watching this, Zach, and I know there's a damn good chance you are, then let me reiterate what I've already told you, and then some. You can't hide behind your gold retriever or black cat mask forever, because someone will always find a way to pull away to reveal what you truly are. A predator that needs to be locked away and put down. If we were ever truly friends, you would never wrong me in any of the ways that you did. You wouldn't have ridiculed me for my special interest while demanding I give a shit about yours. And you sure as hell wouldn't have waited until I got gone to say I was one of the best friends you ever had. That alone is enough to say that you only ever wanted me around because I made you art and gave you attention. I'd have an ounce of pity for you at best, if it weren't for the fact that you did all this to yourself. You, and your pride and your ego. There is a special place in hell for people like you. And I best hope you fucking burn in it. I think that's about all there is to say from my side of the story. If you want to know more about Zach Chef's ToonKritic and what he's done, then there are videos, threads, and documents all over the place that I've talked about it. I made this video to share my own experience with the Zach, and shed further light on the kind of person he truly is. I talk about this not only to make people aware of Zach, but to spread awareness to people like him too. He might be one of the worst of the worst, though he's far from the only person of his kind, unfortunately. Like a social vaccine of sorts, this should make people aware of the signs to look out for when someone comes off suspicious. If somebody is clearly keeping secrets, constantly wiping their tracks, and showing signs that something isn't right with them in general, you don't need to act on the spot, but you should stay vigilant. Talk to other people who know that person about whatever the problem is, or talk to the person themselves if you see it fit. Either way, you should still act when something that's clearly wrong is happening. And even something as little as saying something can make a big difference. Communication is key in community, and it's how we learn about each other in various different ways. Different things that people say can give all sorts of hints, and if some of them aren't good, then you need to be careful. Otherwise, you might end up in the wrong place with the wrong people, like I did. It's not to say that's particularly your fault per se, but awareness still helps prevent potential dangers in ways that you wouldn't believe. In the end, all I want is for you to stay safe, stay strong, and stay determined. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day.